Good morning. It's Kinninigan. We're going to have a little chat about it's a topic that everyone's heard of, the Nephilim, but there have been very few people who have actually made any a lot like reptilians. A lot of information goes out about Nephilim, but I don't think people understand what exactly the Nephilim are. Cryptozoology is a great interest to me. So I this is something I've been researching for quite a while. And also, I'm very protective of my research because, a lot like with my reptilian research, people like to steal other people's research, plagiarize it because we don't have that many people on this platform who actually do real research into subjects they investigate. Um, a lot of big content creators out there that make pretty damn good money on this platform do nothing more than like read other news articles. They don't form their own opinions about anything, or they react to things, or that's fine. But I'm from the old school, and this is what I did with reptilians. And this is a basic. If you ever went to school and learned about journalism, this is the when, what, why, who, where, and how. The six questions that you need to answer investigating anything. This could be about reptilians. It could be about the war in Iran. But if you like, for example, I like to break people's balls a lot, telling them you're never going to understand what's going on in this world politically if you just want to be a political commentator, but totally disregard the fact that secret societies and Freemason exist. And on the other side of the coin, a lot of people putting out this information are Freemason themselves, and that becomes a problem because, like, so I answered all these questions with reptilians, specifically with Alpha Draconians and Native Terrans, and yes, I'm working on a book. Many years ago, I was asked to research a subject. Now, a lot of people have heard of Dogman. I have a theory on what Dogman actually is, but that is not what we're talking about. Specifically, I was asked to research into the cynocephaly, which is a Greek word which obviously means human with a dog head. Now, here's a depiction of cynocephaly. This is more than likely AI. This probably isn't legitimate video. It was probably made with AI, but gives you an idea on what they would look like. Supposedly, these were filmed in Africa in 1993.
The
But
footage
as you
has the
see,
distinct look of an old VHS tape. Slight shake.
these are now these entities, these cynocephaly. Um, yeah, so they're humans with dog heads. So I started researching these. I lost a lot of the content I had posted about it when I lost my other YouTube channels, but they're all on my Odyssey account because I did quite a few videos on cynocephaly. And then I started going down this rabbit hole as to what they are actually, and I told people I was making some connections here. There was a comment on my channel recently about them. Someone actually asked me, are the cynocephaly the Canaanites from the Old Testament? Well, Canaanite is the root of the word canine. Yes, it is. But here's the strange thing with the cynocephaly. They were hostile towards the ruling elite, the Alpha Draconian reptilians. They were the Mongols. I was actually just sent an email about Genghis Khan not being human. And yeah, as far as I know, that's pretty true. For example, Genghis Khan, his top demon, his general Subutai was known as his quote unquote demon dog general. The invading Mongol hordes is one of the reasons why ancient China, who was ruled by the dragon emperors, the Alpha Draconians, built the Great Wall. because these cynocephali were a warrior class. They were absolutely feared by everyone, and they were very hostile to not only humans, but our reptilian overlords. And there's some proof of this throughout history. Um, there would also be examples of them forming alliances with humans in certain situations, even during the ancient Roman times of being kind of a mercenary army for people. And if people found out that you hired the Cynocephali to fight alongside you, and we actually have proof of this in ancient Roman scrolls. I'm going to be showing you a few links here to some of the research I've been doing on this. And yes, so I'm forming my own theory on what the Nephilim actually are. So this is kind of like the first discussion I'm having about it. Whether or not you agree with me, that's fine. But we all have a right to form an opinion. I did it the same thing with reptilians. And so what I'm going to talk to you about is things that the Nephilim are not. There's a reason why I posted that Sasquatch documentary on my Patreon yesterday. Sasquatch is not a Nephilim. The giants that you hear about are not Nephilim. Um, we'll talk about that in a second. By the way, there are different types of giants. This is where things get complex and a little bizarre because and giants are talked about specifically in a separate way in the Old Testament. And most people even get that quote wrong. It doesn't say there were giants on the earth in those times. It says there were giants in the earth during those times. And that's actually something that I don't plagiarize other researchers, so that's why I have some links pulled up to give people credit to where I learned these things from. So anyway, please share, like, subscribe. I do not monetize my videos, and in all honesty, today I'm trying to raise about $30 because I would like to get some marijuana. It's like my only vice. So yeah, TGIF. If you could support the channel, anything would help. So I'm gonna. So anyway, this video was sent to me by one of my subs, DH77. And this was more than likely made with AI, but this is typically what the cynocephali were. Now, obviously, let's get a few facts about. I'll go into. This is such a complex subject to cover because, like I said, it's a word that everyone has heard, and so much information has been thrown around about the Nephilim. Um, but I don't think anyone's really made a solid argument as to what they actually are until I came across a podcast with a very intelligent young man who figured it out. And it has to do with the idea going back to ancient Rome. And there's a reason why I'm using ancient Rome as a baseline. Most of our history comes from Roman history. Rome is still ruling the planet, if you haven't figured out. This is why all of our legal and medical terms are in Latin. This is why our government buildings are shaped after Roman buildings. This is even why Donald Trump is building a Roman triumphal arch in Washington, D.C. right now. That is something that Romans only had built after a great military victory. Although I don't know where Donald Trump has had a great military victory. And why I'm mentioning this is because these, for example, the cynocephali were used in ancient times to oppose the ruling elite. Roman warriors, the legions of Rome, were petrified of cynocephali. They did not want to fight them. That is also true for China and the invading Mongol hordes. Mongolia, there's a psyop that's going out right now known as Tartaria. Tartaria is another word for Tartarus, which is hell. They refer to these Nephilim, Cynocephali, as being from hell. And this, if you understand how Zionists operate and a lot of these demon possessed people in secret societies, that's exactly the same way they attack anything they don't like, except being called now the word of the day is anti-Semitic. Yeah, everyone on Earth is anti-Semitic now. We know how Zionists operate. So, 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 yeah, some of this information does go back to the Bible. I'm going to be doing another lecture on the biblical aspects of this, and I want to do that actually in a live stream. This, I'm just going to talk to you about what I've been researching and finding out about these Nephilim. And for example, like I said, ancient Rome would have not used the word Nephilim. They did, however, know about these races. They called them the monstrous races. And what's even more interesting about the monstrous races is, first of all, it's the well-known quote about the Nephilim from the Bible. The Nephilim are mysterious figures mentioned in the Bible, specifically in Genesis 6:14, where they are described as the offspring of the sons of God and daughters of men. Now, often interpreted as giants or mighty beings, their identity and origin have been widely debated, with some interpretations suggesting they were a result of fallen angels mating with humans. First of all, fallen angels are not having sex with human women. Alpha Draconians are androgynous. They inhabit both male and female in one life form. They are, like I said, androgynous. This is where you get the mythology and secret societies of God being both man and woman at the same time. That's actually a belief taught within secret societies. This this is also why they have these bizarre drag rituals where in Masonic lodges men will dress in drag and they do all these weird, bizarre rituals. And obviously, Zionists themselves in modern times are the ones pushing the transgender agenda. Um, This is why they're so infatuated with such things as homosexuality, transgenderism, anything between the actual love of a real man and a real woman. That agenda is playing out as we speak right now. Okay? And then they wonder why the world rejects them because they're abominations. Looking like the new Supergirl movie coming out. Millie Alcock looks like a dude. Her name's Alcock. And now they can't figure out why nobody wants to go see this movie. Yeah, and that's the thing. Yeah, we know that agenda's been going on. And no, reptilians are not having sex with human women. That's not happening. In fact, you'll probably never hear me talking about with my reptilian research the idea of reptilians raping human women. It doesn't happen. You're more likely to be raped by a Zionist on Epstein Island than an Alpha Draconian reptilian. Reptilians, this is why they despise humans, because we do have male and female among our sex. This ties in with the story of Adam and Eve from the Bible and being tempted by the serpent with the apple of wisdom. Yeah, there's some metaphors going on there. So I think that the Bible translations themselves have been misinterpreted because you're talking about things they would not have they would not have had words in ancient times for such things as genetic engineering. And that's what the Nephilim are. They are products of genetic engineering, the union of animals and humans, which obviously a woman is not going to have sex with a dog and create a cynocephaly. It's not happening. However, they did exist. That could be done with some type of bizarre genetic engineering. This is why I don't have all these questions answered yet. I don't know who did this and why. Although there might be some clues to the why going back to the Old Testament again, and God basically telling the Israelites not to sacrifice your children to Molech. Molech is the Canaanite god of child sacrifice. These cynocephali throughout history have been known to abduct human children and sacrifice them on what is known as Canaanite blood altars. There is a Canaanite blood altar here in the United States on somewhere called Jekyll Island, which is off the coast of, I believe, South Carolina. And It's called Jekyll Island. Want to know why it was called Jekyll Island? Because cynocephali lived on an island at one time, and they used to abduct Native Americans' children and bring them to that island, where there is a Canaanite blood altar where they would sacrifice human children. Because the cynocephali, like I said, they didn't get along with humans at times, and they definitely didn't get along with Alpha Draconian reptilians. That Canaanite blood altar that is on Jekyll Island, this would be a whole nother video in itself, was bought by the Rothschilds. They built a house over it. This is where they had the meeting to set up the Federal Reserve on Jekyll Island, over in a house that they built over a Canaanite blood altar, without a doubt, our Federal Reserve system was done on the blood of children. And then that ties in with a whole story about the Titanic and a bunch of other elite mysteriously dying on the Titanic and the Federal Reserve being set up. Yeah, and you can verify all the facts I just told you. Go look up Jekyll Island and the Canaanite blood altar the Rothschilds built a house over. And these Canaanite blood altars are all around the planet. And what is Canaanite? It's the root of the word canine. So are the Nephilim some type of biblical curse against the fallen angels or the reptilians themselves? Possibly. Like I said, I don't have the answer on who did this. I'm trying. I got 6 questions I'm trying to answer here, and I think I've gotten a little further than most people do. So let's talk about what the Nephilim are not. They are not Sasquatch. First of all, Sasquatch is native to this planet, possibly more native to this planet than we are. It's adapted to its environment. Sasquatch does not need to wear clothes to regulate its body temperature. And this is the first depiction of Sasquatch. That's Humbaba the Terrible from the Epic of Gilgamesh. And what's interesting about Humbaba the Terrible is he was a hairy giant from the cedar forests of Lebanon. Israel's bombing the shit out of Lebanon as we speak right now. Going back to the Epic of Gilgamesh, because Gilgamesh was sent to hunt down Humbaba the Terrible with his homosexual buddy Enkidu. And I'm not even joking about that. That is the origins of homosexuality, because Gilgamesh rejects the love of Ishtar and decides to have a bromance with Enkidu. I've read the Epic of Gilgamesh on my first Kinninigan channel, and I lost the reading. I'm not rereading it. It took me like 3 hours to read, but I did read it. And it talks about this. And what's interesting is, yeah, he was a hairy giant that was known to exist in the cedar forest. This is Sasquatch. And the reason why the Alpha Draconian reptilians absolutely despise him is not only because he's native to this planet, they can't control him. So that they just ignore that he exists, but he is not a Nephilim. He was here before the reptilians were. And there are stories throughout medieval and ancient times of known wild men inhabiting the earth. They weren't called Sasquatch. Sasquatch is a modern word. So when you look back at ancient history, you got to be, you got to know what words different civilizations would have been using at the time. Yeah, so Sasquatch goes back, and besides, you have different types of Sasquatch. I can make a whole nother video just on Sasquatch. You have Celtics, which have human-like faces, and they have body hair that's long. That's a Celtic. You have a Sabe, which is the typical, it's like Patty in that film where they're fully hairy, including the face. Then you have these other types. You have Yeti. You have skunk apes from Florida, which are different. They're adapted to hot and humid climates. Obviously, Sasquatch that you're going to find in Alaska are adapted to colder environments, and they're larger than the ones in the south. You even have types of Sasquatch that are found in the deserts and they are adapted for desert environments. They have thinner hair. They only have 4 toes. But what's interesting about all these creatures is they do have advanced abilities, which we know that humans also are capable of through the decalcification of our pineal gland. That's why I said it's not paranormal abilities that Sasquatch has. It's abilities that we could have as humans also. But the ruling reptilian overlords will not allow us to decalcify our pineal glands and live up to our full human potential, because that would be the end of the Illuminati and the ruling elite. 8 billion enlightened humans are not going to pay taxes, listen to Zionists anymore, or allow a bunch of pedophile black magicians rule this planet. Which is why they despise Sasquatch so much, and they will just not even acknowledge that he or it exists. However, going back to David Paulides, by the way, someone left a comment. Yes, we know David Paulides is probably a Freemason. I'll get that right out in the open. But like most Freemason, he has to put out half truths and half lies. And one of the half truths that he put out is yes, they did a DNA test on Sasquatch. And here's where things get very interesting. According to the DNA that David Paulides had done to the Sasquatch DNA, and talks about it in that documentary on my Patreon, and you can even find it on YouTube where he talks about it, they only were able to figure out the female end of the DNA, and the female origins of the DNA of Sasquatch go back to the Middle East. The Middle East? You mean like the cedar forest of Lebanon, where Humbaba the Terrible comes from? Yeah, that's Sasquatch. What they don't want to tell you about Sasquatch DNA is it's human. It's indigenous to this planet. It's not a Nephilim, and it's indigenous to this planet. And that's all I'm going to talk about with Sasquatch now, because it's a totally different subject. But he is not a Nephilim. Now we're going to open up this giant can of worms, pun intended. What are giants? Now, there's two links I'm going to put in the description, and this is over 4 hours of content you can watch. So I'm only going to post links to where I've gotten some of my research from. If you're interested, one of the links I'm going to post is this. It's almost 2 hours long. This is from Sasquatch Chronicles, but this episode is not about Sasquatch. This is a gentleman that he has on his show that talks about true mountain giants. Now, when you talk about giants, okay, here's the fact. If you're going to talk about giants, you also need to talk about the little people. We know that there are hobbit people that they have admitted they were found off a island of Sumatra. They're known as Homo florensis. That is they actually have a Latin name now, going back to Rome. We also have smaller little people. Now, those were actually shown in the movie Willow. If you watch the original 1980s movie, I love that movie. They had the little people in there. There's a video of one on the internet that's floating around, and these are talked about. We also have the tribe of little people that were indigenous to the islands of Hawaii. I forget their exact Hawaiian name, but they were also hobbit people. Point I'm making is if you're going to talk about giants, you also need to talk about little people also, because it's now what types of giants are there? Not all giants are the same. You have giants that are almost human-like that existed, for example, on Patagonia. They were encountered by ancient sailors. They looked exactly like we do as humans, except they were 9 to 10 feet tall, and they looked exactly like humans did. You also have giants, where Roger from Mud Fossil University, and yes, I know who Roger is. Giants that he talks about, which are on a giant, you can't even begin to imagine the size of the giants he talks about. Basically, the Earth of itself, according to Roger at Mud Fossil University, is built off the remains of giants. The entire Atlas Mountains in Morocco is a giant dragon. Atlas being one of the titans that are imprisoned in Tartarus. And I've already had a personal phone discussion with Roger from Mud Fossil University. I verified what he teaches with ancient Sumerian texts. Um, so then you have another type of giants. You have the hairy red. You have the cannibalistic red-haired giants that inhabited North America, talked about by Native Americans. That same race of giants was found in Kandahar, Afghanistan. And I'm telling you right now, the reason they don't want to have ground troops going in Iran right now is because these giants exist in the Iranian mountains also. And they exist to this day on the Solomon Islands. They were, in fact, encountered during World War II. These are the cannibalistic red haired giants, but at the end, these are the ones with 6 fingers and 6 toes. And I think for many years, people thought these were Nephilim. It's possible. They could be one of the Nephilim, but I'm telling you right now, the Nephilim is a whole species of entities. It's not just a giant or a dog man. And like I said, Rome had a word for this, the monstrous races. Then you have another type of giant, which is very interesting. These are called true mountain giants. The golly, the jolly green giant that you hear talked about in America was one of them. Um, these giants are talked about in Native American legend. Hammerson Peters is a cryptozoologist out of Canada. He runs a Hammerson Peters YouTube channel. He covers the stories of these true mountain giants on his channel a lot. These are the ones that they smell very bad. They're around 20 to 30 feet tall. They're not aggressive towards humans, though. However, they smell so bad that when humans encounter them, humans actually pass out from the smell. And what would happen is these giants would come out of the mountains. These are the ones that the Bible says lived in the earth at those times. These are the ones that they're talking about. And that's because these true mountain giants live inside of mountains. They use boulders to cover up the entrance to their caves so humans can't get. And besides, even if you were able to get inside a cave of one of these giants, you would pass out from the smell. Uh, I've smelled homeless people that have smelled really bad. It's just it makes your eyes water. That's someone who doesn't take a shower for quite a long time, and the smell associated it's bad. It'll make your eyes water. It's probably even just as bad as the smell of death. So, and that's what these true mountain giants are said to smell like, and they would like come down off the mountains, and trees that they touched would smell. It's bacterial. That's what that smell is. And they have 4 toes. They have a foot span that goes out to like 3 feet. And in this episode of Mountain Giants here, he talks about them. They know of one that exists on the Montana Canadian border right now. And the theory is, sadly, that these true mountain giants have slowly and systematically been hunted by the ruling elite. They've been executed. There was a lot of things in America that were living when even the 13 colonies were set up that we couldn't expand out west because, well, the Native Americans talked about it and we all called them crazy. Native Americans told us about Sasquatch. They told us about Thunderbirds. They told us about the hairy cannibalistic giants. They talked about the true mountain giants. And they talked about mermaids, aquatic hominoids, and we just brushed it off as crazy. And in order to settle the new world, we systematically had to hunt all these different. Um, and there's a reason why a lot of Native Americans were forced to become like Freemason to keep their mouths shut about the true history of the United States. And some of these races were well known about, but giants is a whole nother topic. And I find it interesting. The Bible does make a difference between, but true mountain giants do not look typically like humans do. True mountain giants have tusks. Now they're not built like orcs are from D&D, but orcs have tusks. That's why I'm showing you this. And the true mountain giants are said to be lanky, like they're very thin. They're not bulky, muscular, and all that. And they would like come down the mountains with Native Americans, and They smelled so bad that the Native Americans would pass out, and then the true mountain giants would come down and steal all their fish, and then take the fish back, and then the Native Americans would wake up, and all their fish would be gone, and it would stink like really bad, and they knew that the giants, but they never actually harmed the humans. Those are true mountain giants. These might be the giants that the Bible was talking about. Who made them? Why do they have tusks? Tusks is very interesting because if you know anything about pigs and warthogs, they only grow tusks when they go feral, which is interesting. And yeah, so the true mountain giants are said to possess tusks. They're not the hairy cannibalistic giants, although they exist also. So this is what I mean when you talk about giants and little people. That's a whole another thing on itself. However, if they're looking into this, I don't believe they're the Nephilim. Um, where things start to get very bizarre. So, what are the Nephilim? Well, Rome had a word for them. They were called the monstrous races. And the monstrous races, for example, did I have that pulled up? Oh, yeah. They were shown on ancient maps of sailors that went around the world, specifically the dogmen, the cynocephali, even mermaids. Yeah, they were on ancient maps. Now, here's the interesting thing. These, specifically like the cynocephali, seem to disappear in history, and the time they disappeared is around the 1700s. Is when we stopped getting reports of them. Marco Polo encountered them around India on his voyages around the world. Christopher Columbus encountered cynocephali, going back to Jekyll Island in the United States. And Christopher Columbus wrote about them. They also encountered mermaids on their voyages, also, and mermaids are part of the monstrous races from Rome. So, and Saint Christopher was a cynocephali who met Jesus Christ and converted to Christianity, and supposedly Jesus, after that, blessed him with a human form because he didn't want to be a cynocephali anymore. Which, with that context, I'll go more into that when I do the live stream about the biblical aspects of this. So you have Jesus meeting one of these cynocephali, and he converts to Christianity. Jesus makes him into a human. Sounds like these Nephilim were some type of biblical curse, but who made them? That's the interesting part. It wasn't the Alpha Draconians because they were hostile towards the Alpha Draconians. This is in the Vatican. Yeah, did you know that there was a cynocephaly at the Vatican? That's Hermes. Yeah, depicted as a man with a dog head. It's a statue of Hermes. So he's holding the staff of Hermes right there, and the staff of Hermes is another sign for Enki. So I don't know. Maybe they were trying to like glorify the cynocephaly, like they were on their side. Anubis, the Egyptian god of the dead, is not the Egyptian god of the dead. He was a cynocephaly from Africa. There was a country in northern Africa named Cynocephalia by the Greeks. And if you know anything about your Roman history, there's an infamous battle in ancient times known as the Battle of Cynocephalia. Yeah, their history has been written about. So here's where things get very interesting. I don't steal other people's research, and I give credit to where credit's due. This is a gentleman here. His name is Seth Vanderbrook, and I'll pin this podcast. It's a 2-hour podcast where he goes into detail. He's the one who made the connection with the Nephilim being the monstrous races and the cynocephaly being part of that. What he does, he's a Christian that works at a church. I don't know what the denomination he is. But one of his hobbies is he's been getting a hold of ancient Latin texts that now he doesn't speak Latin. He isn't able to decipher them. So he's been taking these texts to a college professor who teaches Latin, who knows how to translate the ancient Latin texts. The Latin texts that he's coming across, though, are basically everyday communications between Romans, rich aristocratic Romans. If you were a rich Roman in ancient times, you didn't have TikTok, you didn't have Twitter, you didn't have text messaging. So when you would sit around in your palace all day, you would have scribes write stuff for you, and if they called it an early form of gossip. And he has scribes that were basically letters going back and forth between rich Romans, talking about what's going on, everyday life in the city, what's going on, and the cynocephalia are talked about all the time in these ancient Latin texts. There was one he deciphered where it talks about a Roman guy had a cynocephaly captured in a cage and wheeled it into the Rome, the city, had it wheeled into the Roman city. And they're talking about him like this guy's crazy. What is he doing with these cynocephaly in the cage? These things are dangerous. And I think, to reiterate on this even more, that it's quite possibly these cynocephali were being captured and forced to fight in the Colosseum at Rome. Makes sense. There's also other races that the Romans talked about that were well known. One of those is satyrs, goat men. And these satyrs are depicted all throughout ancient Rome. Um, and Rome simply referred to these as the quote unquote monstrous races. And the monstrous races are what I believe the Nephilim actually are. And here we go. Strangers from a strange land, monstrous races and evil. And so I'm going to show you some of the monstrous races here. Obviously, what you would call mermaids, aquatic humanoids. The Blemmies, which are actually on the Piraeus map from ancient times. They're these weird creatures that have faces on their chests. Like I said, these are not races that would have been made with typical human procreation, sexual. Um, Nobody had sex to create these things. These are the objects of. Obviously, this was a flex of genetic engineering. Was it a third party alien race that did this? I don't know. I don't have all the answers yet. But then again, I don't think anyone has all the answers on the Nephilim. At least I'm trying now. And this is just something I'm researching now. And same thing I did with reptilians. I was able to make sense of that. Wasn't easy, but it's what I do. Here's another one of the ancient races known as a chaperon. We also had these, the monopods. Now, Credo Mutwa talks about the monopods. He's the Zulu shaman that had the infamous interview with David Icke about reptilians. He talks about native reptilian knowledge in Africa, of all things. And the monopods were talked about. The 1 foot race of monopods is where the term getting your foot in the door comes from. Because allegedly the ruling elite set. Now, I told you that um, the monopods seem to be something else. I don't know if they're exactly one of the Nephilim, but the monopods were like magical tulpas used by very powerful magicians at the time. Possibly, they sent them to the New World to have meetings with Native Americans. These monopods, according to Credo Mutwa, wore black robes. They had 1 foot, and they all wore the Egyptian ankh around their neck. And the ankh looks like a cross. You know what an ankh is. And the Native Americans believe that these creatures came to them, were sent by God. And what had happened, and this is where the term getting your foot in the door comes from, is they showed like magical skills to Native Americans and taught them different forms of probably. These are probably the entities that taught Native Americans how to do bad witchcraft. That did happen. There were shaman and ancient some of the tribes, they're not all Native Americans are the same. Some of them practice very bad black magic. Um, some of them didn't. But supposedly these entities were meeting with Native Americans, and they all wore ankhs around their neck, and they had 1 foot. And when the conquistadors came to the New World, they obviously had crosses on their sails of their ship. And Credo Motwell said that the Native Americans met all these conquistadors at the shores to greet them because they thought they were sent by the gods, where they were slaughtered on the beaches. So the Spanish didn't have to go into the countryside looking for the Native Americans, and sadly, they trusted them when they first came to the New World because they saw the crosses and they remembered the monopods with the ankhs around their neck, and the Native Americans were slaughtered on the beaches by the Spanish. And Creta Motwa told that story, and that's where the term "getting your foot in the door" comes from. Yeah, bizarre stuff here. So I don't know about the monopods being one of the Nephilim. They could have been a magical tulpa created by the Draconians, but they are talked about. And then you have the ancient Greek stories, obviously the Cyclops. You had Sphinxes, the Cynocephali, obviously the most famous of the Nephilim. These creatures, mainly from ancient Greece, the humans with the wings, and they were like a mixture of birds and humans. Manticore, yeah, that's another interesting. Yeah, and they're depicted in old stone carvings. Yeah. They also have wild men depicted on here. Now, the wild men we're known about. Now, the wild men typically, like I was talking about Sasquatch earlier, they look more like Celtics. That's like Shaka from Land of the Lost. Shaka has a human looking face. And over evolutionary time, they probably developed advanced abilities, being left alone and not evolving with us humans who went and moved into cities with our Masonic lodges and our rolling Zionist pedophile pigs rolling over us. Sasquatch didn't take that form of evolution. He really is a free, they're more free than we are. Why do you think Alpha Draconians absolutely despise Sasquatch? They don't like Humbaba the Terrible. Gee, I wonder why. Because they don't like anything they can't control. This is why they won't allow humans to develop our paranormal abilities with our third eye. Yeah, these are other. I believe that's a wild man sculpture. So yeah, the wild men were known about. Uh, and here, this is more than likely Zionist propaganda here. They're depicting Mother Mary as a wild woman. Babylonian Talmud says some bad things about Jesus and his mother. They basically call Mother Mary a whore in Babylonian Talmud. She who descended from princes and governors played the harlot with carpenters. That is the exact quote from Babylonian Talmud. And that's why Zionists don't want to debate me, because I actually know what's in Babylonian Talmud. So they can't gaslight this goyim. Yeah, gee, I wonder why. So this is where, in the monstrous races, entail a whole slew of other things. Now, there might be aquatic hominoids that are indigenous to Earth that are not necessarily bad. Those aquatic hominoids are talked about in the Hindu epics. And then we have other ones which are very hostile to humans. And some of those were encountered during World War II in certain island chains in the South Pacific. They don't look like humans at all. They don't look like the Little Mermaid. They're very aggressive. There was a video I just showed on my channel of a aquatic hominoid thing shooting electricity out of itself. That's on my YouTube channel. Just look up the mermaid from Jamaica recently. That might be one of the Nephilim. And it sounds like the Nephilim are very hostile to. And going back to ancient Roman times, I believe it was Caligula. I believe that was the Roman emperor who declared a war on Poseidon and basically ordered Roman legions to go into the ocean and slay mermaids. That actually happened. They write about it in history, but mainstream archaeologists they try to brush it off like, no, well, he was just pretty insane, and yeah, yeah. How insane are these people? I mean, and I would say that are we any better in modern times? Even though we're not making genetic mutations like this, look what they're trying to do with artificial intelligence, merging a man and machine. So what is so different from merging man with animals? I mean, we're trying to do basically the same thing with AI. That's not considered crazy. Well, it depends who you talk to. I don't think the AI thing's going to work out. It's going to because these data centers are trying to build and all that. But one thing that the Cynocephali have is they also have a connection to quite possibly the Hollow Earth because they were associated with cave systems. It's quite possibly that's where the Cynocephali and other races of Nephilim actually went. They might have went back into the Hollow Earth, but around 1700, they just disappear from history. And then that's where you get the psyop of Tartaria and the mud flood. Whenever you hear rhyming words, that's a red flag of a psyop. Mud flood, Nasara, Jasara, Medbed. Yeah, that's indicative of black magicians and rhyming words. So whenever you hear mud flood, just yeah, it's bullshit. Plus, they say the area is called Tartaria. Tartaria is a play on the word Tartarus, which is hell. And there's a reason why these Subutai, for example, he was called Genghis Khan's demon dog general. Because if the Alpha Draconians and ruling elite didn't like you, they basically talk shit about you, and they still do it to this day. Starting with Humbaba the Terrible. Yeah, the hairy man they couldn't hunt down in the cedar forests of Lebanon in ancient times. So they just act like he doesn't exist because we can't control him. He won't listen to us. He won't be one of our slaves. So we just act like they don't exist. Same thing with the aquatic species. Because there's no way an avian reptilian is going to control the oceans on this planet. We humans aren't either. And who knows what's living in the oceans? I'm assuming multiple species of hominoids. And they've been reported on throughout history also. So that's kind of. Oh, here's where things get very interesting. The Vikings. Going back to Hollow Earth and the Asgard pantheon. The religious pantheon of the Vikings is not something that I think a bunch of ale drinking, mushroom eating pagans came up with themselves. I believe it has something to do with Hollow Earth. The nine worlds might be a reference to the Hollow Earth. Here's another interesting. This is a wood carving of Odin and a Viking berserker. That Viking berserker looks like a cynocephali. Ancient historians, with their great knowledge, say, well, that's because the Viking berserkers would kill wolves and then wear the wolf head on top of their head like a helmet. Did they? Because if you actually read a history about Viking berserkers, they were said to howl like wolves in battle. Here's where things get even more interesting. The Vikings obviously raided England a lot and didn't get along with the reptilian kings of England. This is where I said the Cynocephali were hostile towards Alpha Draconian reptilians and possibly formed alliances with other humans to fight them. That's an alliance here we have with Vikings. You have Odin standing right next to a Cynocephali. The Viking berserkers were Cynocephali. They were dogmen, just like the Mongols were. Just like we have the races of Cynocephali around India, also on island chains around India. This is a wood carving, and they tried to say, well, that's because they just wore wolf heads. Yeah, did they? Does Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. If you know, it makes more sense that they were actually cynocephali that fought alongside the Vikings. And there are accounts of medieval knights from England encountering dogmen during battles in medieval times. So it's more than likely, yes, cynocephali were fighting alongside the Vikings. The Vikings also used a word, Kinninigan, to identify reptilian shapeshifters, according to some mythology. And then this is why probably the Vikings were very shy, even though they were pagan. You would think that Alpha Draconians and the ruling elite would admire other pagans, but they didn't like the Vikings. The Vikings would eventually be the founders of Russia, also. Here's where things get very bizarre. Russians, to this day, including Vladimir Putin himself, they have a very good relationship with dogs. Cats, also. You know who doesn't like dogs? Chinese people. Going back to the Great Wall of China and the invading Mongol hordes. They refer to Japanese people as dog-faced men. There are ancient accounts of cynocephali inhabiting the islands of Japan also. This could be why modern Chinese people don't even like dogs that much. And it would make sense because they have a bad history of dog people. So, yes. So, are the Nephilim some sort of biblical curse? And who made them? And why? I don't have all the answers, but I'm working on it. And if I could answer these 6 questions right here, because I'm not going to half-ass a book. I'm not one of those people. If I'm going to research a subject, I want all the answers. I might not be right, but at least I want to formulate some opinions that are my own, or giving people credit where it's due. So I think if I can answer all these, I could write a book about the Nephilim or the monstrous races. So we'll see. I definitely have all these questions answered about reptilians, without a doubt. So yeah, I am very protective of the research I do. If I come across other content creators here on YouTube talking about the Nephilim are the monstrous races of Rome, and you're not referring to this guy as to where you got your information from, or me, that's not going to be cool. That's why I'm pinning this as a top comment. So you want to now, his podcast is called the Hidden History of Dogman. Please note the Dogman. This is not the Dogman that's like on film with the ones that inhabit like the land around the lakes. Those are true like dogmen. Those are something different. I will make a separate video on them, but they are not the cynocephali. These are what the cynocephali look like, and this is probably made with AI, but this is typically what they do look like. And yes, they did abduct human children. And here's where things get very bizarre. I told you, Molech is the Canaanite god of child sacrifice. Marco Polo, and I'm going to show this, I'll show the journals of Marco Polo whenever I do this live stream. Might be tonight. Anyone want to buy me some weed? I'll live stream tonight. Or I always need cigarettes. I tell people that. I'm going to end this because this is something I figured out myself, reading through the journals of Marco Polo. Marco Polo encountered a race of cynocephali off the coast of India. He said they had a religious, they did have a religion, and they worshipped an owl, like, no, it wasn't owl god. It was they worshipped a god that looked a lot like a bull. Molech, the Canaanite god of child sacrifice, is depicted as being a bull. And yes, Marco Polo wrote that he encountered cynocephali that were worshipping a bull-like god. That is Molech. So the cynocephali were worshipping Molech and sacrificing human children to it. And I told you the story at Jekyll Island here in the United States. You can look up that yourself. In the Old Testament, there are. This is what I've been going through with the biblical stuff. You obviously have like the different tribes of Israel, Daniel, and all that, but you also have these other tribes known as the Edomites, the Moabs, the Adamites, and these were the tribes that supposedly God told, "Do not sacrifice your children to Molech." That is actually a quote from the Old Testament. And we have these tribes that are giving child sacrifices to Molech. But what's also weird is I'm trying to figure out, why do we have occultists today, like the Bohemian Grove? Why do we have humans also offering children to Molech? If this was the same god that the Cynocephali were worshiping, and the Cynocephali are hostile towards Alpha Draconians and the ruling elite. That's what I can't make sense of. So, this is what I got on the Nephilim so far. They're not the giants. They are not Sasquatch. They're something even more bizarre known as, quite simply, the monstrous races. And these monstrous races, that's what they were called in ancient Rome. And they were well known about. So, that's kind of my rant so far on what I have on the Nephilim. I am making some progress on it, though. And some of the stuff that I figured out, I'll give you more information when I do the live stream. That'll be more stuff that's tied in with the Bible, of all things. And of course, I'll do another video just on giants and little people. And I am going to do another lecture on Sasquatch, on what they really are, and obviously why they're covered up. So, anyway, that's all for this video today. If you could support my channel at Cash App, PayPal, Vemno's all in the description. I'm trying to get about $30 together. Gets me an eighth of an ounce of weed and lasts me a couple days. I'd be happy. It's about. I don't do anything else except research reptilians and the Nephilim, and maybe play a video game. It's going to be hot today. It's going up to like 100 degrees. Finally put the air conditioner in my window, and it means my electric bill is going to be higher now. So anything you could donate will help me and the cats. We always need stuff, you know. And who knows? Maybe I can publish some books about reptilians and the Nephilim, and maybe I'll get some financial rewards in this lifetime. It's either that or I got to think of an end game here. So writing some books would be a good end game. So anyway, I got to get my book published about reptilians. And then I think if I could answer the question about the Nephilim also, that would be a very big subject of interest, because a lot of people reference the Nephilim. I don't think any of them have grasped or kind of put deep thought or research into what they actually are. And I think that's why most people just associate them with giants. But if read the Old Testament, there's a distinction between giants and the Nephilim. They are not the same. And most people from when they read the Old Testament, don't even realize it says giants were in the earth at that time, not on the earth. Hence, you'll learn about that. So I'll pin these two podcasts as the top comments. The one about mountain giants and the one about the dogmen. And you could hear about this guy's research translated ancient Latin, and how Romans would openly talk about the Cynocephali and the monstrous races. He also talks about satyrs. And so, anyway. And this is kind of the same thing I did with reptilians. I didn't. The idea of them being avian came originally from Jim Henson and the Dark Crystal, of all things. So, this is what I mean. Like, These are just massive puzzles that we got to find all the pieces to and put together correctly. And of course, because of the nature of the world today with secret societies and other people and the ruling elite, a lot of bullshit gets thrown around also about everything. From them calling reptilians lizard people to them not even knowing what the hell the Nephilim really are. And if they are some sort of biblical curse, what makes you think that you're going to get the truth about the Nephilim from the ruling elite if the Nephilim were hostile to them? Specifically when it comes to like the Mongols in ancient China, the Vikings, and the the reptilian royalty forming England at that time. Vikings were very hostile towards the reptilian royal families. Watch the TV show Vikings. That's a good TV show. And The Last Kingdom is also a really good show about the wars between the Vikings and the English. In fact, I might have to rewatch that TV show because there's nothing exciting coming on TV soon. I'm not even excited for House of the Dragon. That show went down the fucking gutter. I didn't even watch season 2. Um, there isn't even any movies coming out. I think for except Disclosure Day from Steven Spielberg. Is Steven Spielberg? Is he paying me royalties for that movie? I doubt it. He does have a shapeshifter in the trailer. I covered the that movie also. It's on my YouTube channel. Disclosure Day right here. If you want to see my thoughts on I've covered it. So that's what I have about. Oh, here we are. Here's the comment I was looking for. I didn't heart it yet. Are the Canaanites a race of cynocephaly? Well, I think you're on the right track right there. But I think it's more than just the cynocephaly. Canaanites are possibly a race of the Nephilim. And yeah, it is the root of the word canine. And these monstrous races were well known about in ancient Roman times. They're even drawn on maps. Like I said, you have ancient maps that show the monstrous races on them that they'd encountered. And Anubis, probably the most infamous cynocephaly in history because he's not the god of the dead. He was a real entity. He was a living, breathing entity. And he's holding the Ankh. Remember the story about the monopods I told you about? So there was definitely some weirdness going on. Some of the cynocephaly, not all of them were hostile to humans. Obviously, St. Christopher converted to Catholicism and was made human by Jesus himself. But obviously, we know that a human woman is not having sex with a dog and making a dog man. That's not happening. This was genetic engineering. And this is why I believe the Bible quotes can't be accurately translated because how do you take the Old Testament and make sense of genetic engineering out of it? You can't. So yeah, that's how a dog man's skull would have looked. So anyway, that's my introduction to the Nephilim and the monstrous races that I'm working on. You can support the channel. All the links are in the description. Take care and God bless.